Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. Today's episode is a little bit different in that it's a solo episode with me. And in all honesty, it's an episode that I recorded very early in my podcast journey. And I published for a hot minute, and I think I had about 3 downloads, and then I pulled it down because I started going into a different direction with doing more interviews. But I was thinking about the end of year lineup and knew that I had the decluttering and organizing episode out there, and I knew that there was a lot of interest, and this really fits into that theme. Also, as we start to wrap up the year and roll into the new year, it's often a time where people start to project their goals and sometimes take a look back at their year in review. And so I think it's very fitting that you hear this message and hopefully do something with it. My goal for you would be to just have you think. That's always my goal, to try to push the lines a little bit on where we sit in our quote unquote comfort zone, get us to think outside of our boxes and to kind of take a step forward in whatever direction we're aiming for. And so I'll leave you with this episode on your junk drawer and how that ties into many aspects of your life. And I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. So today I want to talk a little bit about the abyss I have in my kitchen that I call the junk drawer. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about, but if not, picture this random drawer, usually in the kitchen, but it definitely can be anywhere. It's filled with all kinds of random stuff that gets thrown in, mostly because it's either not important enough, big enough, or doesn't have a place of its own, so it gets tossed into this one drawer. And typically, it gets left there for years, pretty much forgotten. I recently did a little inventory on my junk drawer when I was looking for something. Mine has things like markers, random coupons, a screwdriver, chip clips, rubber bands, trinkets from a couple of trips taken who knows when, pens, keychains, batteries, super glue, duct tape, elastic bands, and a few random pieces of plastic that definitely went to some appliance or accessory, and I was convinced I would need again at some point, but I have no idea what they go to, how to put them back together, or where they belong. Okay, I'm thinking you probably get the point by now, right? There's a little bit of everything in there. It's all mashed together in this one big tangled web of a mess. Can you picture it? Do you have anything like that in your house? All of the things that I mentioned can be useful at the right time. Some were really useful in the past to me, and some may be useful in the future. But honestly, most of them just sit in that drawer without much thought because I either can't find them when I need them, they're in a jumbled mess and they're hidden so I don't know they're there, or I don't even remember where they are because it's been so long since I put them in there. And I guess the last point would be, maybe I remember they're in there, but I don't want to be bothered digging through that big cluttered mess to find them. The problem is things get put in the junk drawer without much validation and we never look back. We rarely take inventory to remember what's in there or to organize it, to figure out what's still necessary and serving a purpose. We often just leave it in there, all of it, without a second thought. Eventually, the drawer just becomes so full and so unmanageable. You not only forget what's in there, even if you remember, it's just too much work to sort through it all and find exactly what you need. So most of the time, you either use the same handful of things that are on the top of the drawer over and over, or you don't use anything from the drawer at all. And thinking about the junk drawer, I realized it's a little bit of an analogy for our lives. Think about the markers and pens in that drawer. How often do we forget about most of them when we remember, or if we happen to see them in the drawer and we grab them out, What are the chances it even works? Isn't it more likely that the springs have popped out of the pens, or the ink is dry in the markers? Maybe the covers came off and they're missing now. Couldn't we say those markers and pens are similar to relationships we accumulate over the years? Oftentimes, we leave them unattended or on autopilot for too long. Shouldn't we really be taking inventory of them on a regular basis, checking in to see what condition they're in, sorting through them and getting rid of the extras and the ones we aren't using? Instead of keeping all of them, keep a core group and hold them close and interact and use them more often. Shouldn't those special relationships be kept fresh and in a safe place and treasured versus being tossed in the abyss of the junk drawer for years? How about those random coupons in that drawer? When's the last time you took a look at them to see if they're expired or they're still valid? Or figured out if they are even for a product that you might use? I'm going to go out on a limb and guess it's not something you do often. I know I don't. Couldn't we look at those random coupons as a parallel for our goals? With coupons, we have the best intentions for using them to save money. But often, many of us aren't consistent with it. We might use one here or there, but more often than not, we forget about them until we're in the store or at the register and it's too late. Isn't that the same as how some of us treat our personal goals? How many times have you wanted to save money but made an impulsive purchase and didn't really think about how it's going to move you away from your goal instead of closer to your goal? How about exercise? Have you ever set any goals to have a certain amount of steps or go to the gym a certain amount of times? And if you do have a certain amount of steps, how about when you're parking your car? Do you ever still look for the closest space versus the furthest space away? Do you ever take the elevator versus the stairs? If you want to use those coupons, you need to practice that on a regular basis. You need to keep them organized and categorized and build them into a shopping plan. If you want to save money, lose weight, or exercise more, you also have to build regular practices that incorporate those goals on a consistent basis. And what about those rubber bands, batteries, and chip clips? Many of those things have legitimate uses, but may never get used because they're buried in all the clutter. Sometimes, though, they're no longer useful to us, and we're just using up space, wasting space, and adding to the chaos by leaving them in the drawer. Sometimes they're even broken, but we still keep them. We've accumulated them from somewhere. Maybe someone gave them to us. Maybe we picked them up randomly along the way. Who knows, really? But regardless from where they came from, we hang on to them for years. Couldn't we say these miscellaneous items in the drawer are similar to our thoughts? Some of them were given to us. Some of them we picked up along the way. Some of them work for us if we use them at the right time and in the right way. Some we forget about because they're buried too deep, or we got so caught up in the demands of life or ideas of what we needed to do or be that we actually forgot they were there. And others are still in there taking up space, cluttering things, creating chaos, but they no longer serve us in a positive way. Isn't it interesting that most of us have these type of junk drawers, and most of us forget them or ignore them until they get stuck, they're overwhelming, or you really, really need something and have to go dig through the drawer to get it? It's a bit like life, if you ask me. We run on autopilot most of the time. We have the same routines and habits. We rarely examine our relationships, our goals, our thoughts. We often lose ourselves, what we love, who we wanted to be, by throwing those thoughts and ideas and passions in a figurative junk drawer. And oftentimes we forget they even exist until something happens that forces us to examine them or to remember what was in the drawer in the first place. I saw this play out for me last year. After 26 years, I separated from a company I had pretty much grown up in. I had built a great career. I had a high-performing team, and I absolutely loved working with them. And overall, I really loved my job. But then life happened. The company went through 2 back-to-back acquisitions, and what came out the other side was a company that I was no longer in alignment with, and a job I no longer found joy in. And so, after 26 years, I separated from the company. It was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. It was awful leaving all my friends and coworkers, clients, vendors, all of the people I've built these really collaborative partnerships and deep relationships with over the years, but it was what I really, really needed. So I took 6 months off to rest, to have fun with my granddaughter, to clean out my junk drawers, literally and figuratively. For the first time in a very long time, I found myself with time to focus on me and my family first, time to reflect, time to do things I always wanted to do but never had the time, including organizing closets and drawers in my house. I also took time to revisit my thoughts, my habits, and my goals. I did a lot of purging in that 6 months to eliminate the things that were no longer serving me. But once the clutter was removed, there was space. There was space to remember who I used to be, who I always wanted to be, things I loved to do but had forgotten because I never had time to do them. I was able to reframe my perspective, my priorities, and create new habits and new goals. It was an amazing 6 months, and my life has been changed considerably because of it. The sad part is, had the situation at work not deteriorated so much, I probably would not have been pushed to make a change, to really examine what was working for me and what wasn't. But just like we should be doing with our junk drawers and cleaning them out, taking inventory on a regular basis, we need to take all the contents out piece by piece and really examine them. We need to separate out the things that are serving us well, have a place in our lives, and we need to purge the others. This shouldn't be a one-time thing. This should be a fairly regular practice to keep your drawer in order and relevant. We need to do the same thing in our lives. Get rid of the excess stuff that is no longer serving us and surround ourselves with people, goals, and thoughts that will propel us forward to where we want to go, not hold us back to where we've been. We need to make space in our lives and in our thoughts for the stuff that aligns with who we want to be. We need to allow ourselves the time and the space to remember who we want to be and the life we really want to have. So let me ask you, when was the last time you cleaned out your junk drawer? Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.